I've taken a long time, but he has time. And he has time, and we're going to give him time. Brother Joomaay actually is the founder of the Pan African Fedralist Movement. And what I was telling you about organization, and when I started about Malcolm and his relationship to him, segueing to him, when I discovered that he was, I discovered him several years ago, but he had started building this organization, building an organization that that should have been built long time ago. And he built this organization. Now, I'm telling you, building an organization of black people, that's a hard thing. Yeah. I'm telling you, it's difficult. I watched all of the debates and the arguments and people trying to get him to go this way and that way and to do this, to take this issue and that issue. And the brother had one goal: how we bring about united Africa. That's his goal. Don't give me all these other side arguments and debates and whether they're ethnic or this or regional or that. How are we going to do this? I consider Joomaay Faye actually probably the top organizer of African people today. And just to have him in this building is an honor that is one of the highest honors that I know. Brother Joomaay, I mean, I could go and tell you all kinds of things about him, but I'll tell you what, he best presents himself by telling you what he's about. And I love him and appreciate you. And brother, will you come now and take care? Brother. You know you honor us so much.
Should I do? Okay. Well, I don't know if I deserve that, you know. One thing is certain: if I am or have the energy to do that, it's because I'm thinking of people like you. You know, I just kind of like, I'm baffled in many ways because, my brother, how do you do it? How do you maintain your energy about liberating our people after many people betray you here, did this and all of that, you know? And one of the elements in the Monday anthem, you know, when they described what the chief is, you know, they say that you have to be someone who discouragement is not even something that exists. You know, it's just, and I really appreciate you. Thank you very much, my brother, for leaving DC and coming here. You know, it's really, and all of you, I feel blessed to be here again. And I don't want to talk about Thomas. I was there for 2 years with him, you know, from March 1985 to May 1987, you know. And actually, Thomas is the one who really kind of like inspired me to political science, to have my doctorate in political science. Because when I was part of the lecture, when I was there, I realized that, see, taking power is a whole lot easier than building a revolutionary society. That's right. You know, it's really going against the very people for whom you are doing it. Because most of the time, the masses, they just don't want to have to go through profound changes. And that was the frustration of Thomas. He was frustrated every day. People, even the fact that doing sport, because people eat fat and all of that stuff, they get sick. Thomas wanted people to do sport. Wednesday, from 4 o'clock, you don't have to work. You are paid, but just go do sport. And everyone I walked in the city, and you know, your big brother is, you know, who is, you know, I can't do sport. I said, but it's for you. Why don't you do it and try for 10 years? You will see. So anyway, that inspired me. And also, Malcolm X, of course, Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey is, the Pan African Fedralist Movement is a Garveyite movement. Fundamentally, we are founded on Garvey because a lot of people confuse Pan-Africans with African unionism. Completely different. Pan-African is for black people. Whoever tells you anything else is just saying what they don't know. But if you look at the history, the ideology, and everything, the confusion was created somewhere. I don't want to go over that. We talked about it here last time. But Garvey was the first one to connect the liberation of black people with a United States of Africa. And then if you think even deeper about when he talked about the empire on which the sun never sets, you could realize that it was not just about Africa. It was black people all over the world that are involved. This is why the Pan-African, we call ourselves Pan-African, because we are African continental unionist with a Pan-African reaching out to black people all over the world, because the condition of black people will not ameliorate in terms of respect and all, unless they hold power. Reparation, all of that will not happen really. It will be just, it would be a conniving, statement or law, that they will pass. But you don't beg for reparation, you demand it. But in order to demand it, you have to have the power to demand it. If you don't have the power, how could you imagine, in the course of the very people who were the reason for slavery, that you could go in those courts and who is going to be enforcing that law? And they don't know the story of Andrew Jackson and the Indians. When the Supreme Court passed a law that, you guys in Georgia, you cannot take the land because of the gold, Jackson said to the Supreme Court justice, well, implement it yourself.
That's right.
That's right. So you have to ignore history in order to be able to go through these things, instead of focusing, and this is why we are focused, the PAFM. We focus on one thing. We know power is the foundation of sovereignty.
Yes.
If you don't have the power, you can't have sovereignty. And it will come back to philosophers called negative liberty, and positive liberty. Positive sovereignty is a fundamental before you talk about anything else. But anyway, I'm sorry for this discussion. Greetings, everyone. Peace and love to you, who despite the cold have come to be part of this conversation. This is a conversation. This is not a lecture or anything. It's just a conversation. We want to have a conversation. First and foremost, allow me to express my happiness to be here again. I was here a few months ago. And my gratitude to my dear big brother here, Molefi, and his wife, Sister Anna, for really all the effort, all the investment that they're making in the struggle for the restoration of the sovereignty of Africans of the blood, as my mentor, Ali Mazrui, used to call black people. As Ali Mazrui used to call black people. A very beneficial high level of melanin in their body. Put simply, black people. Black is not just beautiful, it is useful. Black is not just beautiful, it is useful. Go how much people are spending on creams to try to look like you a little bit. You don't spend a penny. You just get out and you are. So black is beautiful. Yes, James Brown, black is beautiful, but it is also useful. Thank you, Brother Molefi, for having me here. I just want to say a little word here because today, a year ago, Adama Samaseku, the former president of the Pan African Fedralist Movement, former minister of education, of youngsters in Mali, passed away. Yes. Today is the anniversary of his death. So, just we are mourning him, and please give him some of your prayers. For yes, exactly. I'm very excited to share with you in this room, or those who are following outside in the world, some of the ideas that are basis for which Pan African Fedralist Movement is saying we must unite by 2030 or around that, or else, like Julius Nyerere said, we are going to be in serious trouble, because without unity, Africans, we are just lost, and we will come back to that. But reality is that the world situation was happening. There are things that are happening that made the Pan African Fedralist Movement say that. This slogan was neither pulled out of a magician's hat, nor is the expression of the optimistic wish of original or unrealistic dreamers. It is derived from a profound and careful analysis of today's world geopolitics and the present reality on the African countries of the continent and those in diaspora like Haiti, Jamaica. Just a little parenthesis, the PAFM does not call for a United States of Africa. We don't call for a United States of Africa. We call for a United African State. Jamaica is an African state. Barbados is an African state. Haiti is an African state. Any state out there which has its majority Africans is an African state. So we want these states to unite to materialize the dream of Marcus Garvey, which is an empire on which the sun never set, because they will be from Mogadishu all the way to Melanesia, Micronesia, and all of those people who actually call themselves or refer to themselves as Africans. The warning that, let me just repeat that, the United States of Africa by the end of the decade 2020 and 2030. This warning is anchored in 4 factors. The first factor is the de facto inability of the African countries to take advantage of the demographic dividend. I don't know if there are economists among us or people who like economics, but the de facto inability of the African countries to not be able to take advantage of the demographic dividend is causing many young Africans, who are the overwhelming majority of the population, despair. And I'm going to go back on that to explain why. The second factor is the arrival of imperialism, the imperialist mode of production, at its limit for the creation of enough opportunities for self-betterment, particularly for the intellectual petite bourgeoisie class in our countries, meaning academics, intellectuals, and all of that stuff. The provider of the political supporters and enablers of the action of improvisation. I mean, here, the intellectuals in Africa, are indeed today most touched by this imperialism reaching its limit, because as providers of political support for the imperialists and theories, repetitors of their theories on the continent, they are today at a loss, because, and we will come back on this, because of the fact that imperialists can no longer, when you come out of the university, neocolonials can no longer give you a job. Many people are doctors, you have doctors, you have all kinds of things, who come out of school, they don't have any prospect of having a job. When imperialism was able to provide them with a job, I mean, they were happy. They had no reason for rebelling on them. But today, it is no longer the case. And that's the factor. The third element is the ripeness of the condition, for the end of the present mode of production. Ripeness of condition is an awareness thing. It is not a material consciousness thing. People come to level where they understand the system is not working for us. Everyone knows that the system is not working. This is why, for example, my nephew in Senegal was able to win the elections because they called for the end of a system. They did not explain why. And we will come back on that later too. And the last but not least element is the new scramble for Africa going on right before our eyes.
That's right.
The Chinese, the Turks. I cannot believe the African heads of state go to South Korea, calling a meeting of the African head of state. That's right. I mean, South Korea, which is not even half the 20th of Cameroon.
That's right.
So let us address these issues one by one. The first one that I will address is the fact that imperialist mode of production has reached its limit. Imperialism, okay. First of all, allow me to explain what the difference between imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism are, because they are different. There is imperialism, there is colonialism, and neocolonialism. Imperialism is an economic mode of production and distribution. Just like the feudal mode of production, the slavery mode of production, imperialism is a variant of capitalism, the capitalist mode of production. It's a mode of production. Colonialism and neocolonialism are the political systems which allowed imperial countries to impose this oppressive and exploitative mode of production on many nations worldwide. It's neocolonialism and colonialism are political system, mode of ruling people, of society, and they are specifically geared or created in order to be able to manage, to allow imperialist exploitation. All African nations on the continent, except Ethiopia and Liberia, and the Caribbean islands are victims of this system. Ethiopia and Liberia, I would even put it a little bit of a question mark there, a little bit, because they are victim. They are not victim of colonialism, but they are victim of imperialism. Since the middle of the 19th centuries, production which is imposed to African people of the continent and Africans in the Caribbean island, where they made up the overwhelming majority of the citizen black people. First, it was by military might, the imperialist mode of production, and an army of colonial administrators. That's what it was first, and that's the colonial system. Then, in the middle of the 20th centuries, it was the African intellectuals who were entrusted with watching over the interests of the imperialists in exchange of small rental fees of their independent countries. This is, what exactly is imperialism? Let me just go a little bit more on detail about imperialism. Capitalism started with creating a class of individuals who were dispossessed of their land. This is in Western Europe mainly. And their transformation into propertyless individuals who have nothing to sell for survival, capacity to work. Karl Marx referred to them as the proletariat, in his seminal work, Capital. When in Western Europe, capitalism arrived at a point where it was no longer able to create more jobs, imperialism became its new invention. This consisted in the transformation of entire nations in proletariat, like the proletarization of nations, for the extraction from them of the entire national surplus value of their economies. This survival choice became a necessity to avoid social upheavals in Europe, which will have overthrown the political and economic system ruling the exploited masses of Europe. So, as we all know, it is the surplus value in an economy, of a national economy, which makes capital growth possible and economic prosperity of nations. If it is reinvested within the perimeter of the nation which produces it, it allows growth. Or if it's invested on behalf of that nation outside of those borders, like trade and financial capital, for example. If it is siphoned out of the nation which produces it, growing poverty becomes the outcome. This is why African countries where the imperialist mode of production is the dominant one, are being impoverished year after year. You all know this. African poverty is growing, never going down. Because, let me just put it this way. If you are like a store owner, okay, you depend on the benefit you make to help your family and expand your store. But if you sell, and at the end of the month, the benefit that you make from the store is taken away from you, and you left with that you could keep your family to survive and keep that store alive, what is your fate? Your fate is poverty. That's what surplus value, taking surplus value from nations may happen. How can we end the irrational poverty in Africa, where the abundance of natural resources and underemployed workers is indisputable? There are people to work, there are resources, but how could we end it? The response of an honest economist like Paul Barron, a former economist, I think that some of you know him, is stop the siphoning of their national surplus value from these countries and let it be invested domestically. That's the response. Anything else is a joke. However, the most popular theories fed to African intellectuals, and you will notice I insist a lot on African intellectuals, because 70% of the situation, in the desperate situation in which African people are, is caused by African intellectuals. 75% is caused by them. And this is why I keep coming back onto these intellectuals. Intellectuals are the ones who liberate people. All revolutions in history have been led by intellectuals. In Japan, 6 intellectuals led the Meiji Restoration, which lead to Japan, the Japan that we know after all. You know, African intellectuals, if they collaborate here in the U.S., the Thomas Paine, the Jefferson, and then all of them, I mean, they were intellectuals, Martin Hamilton, one of the highest of them, they were intellectuals. You go to the revolution, you go anywhere, it's the intellectuals who lead the revolution. During the independencies also, it was intellectuals like Kwame Nkrumah, Nyerere, others that led these revolutions. So this is why I insist a lot on intellectual, because people are looking at the culprit outside. It is the imperialists who are at fault. They are doing what they need to do to get their people better conditions of life. It's us to do what need to be for Africans to have a condition of life. Why do we have to blame them?
That's right.
However, the most theory fed to African intellectuals who repeat them like parrots, produced by a whole bunch of Western economists like Jeffrey Sachs, like Paul Collier. These popular academics have worked hard to blind African academics regarding the real reason of the growing poverty in the African countries. They are telling them that the rise of poverty in Africa is caused by lies like Africans are making too many babies and are not being wise about how they manage the political and economic crumbs left behind by the imperialists through their misgovernance and corruption. They tell you it's corruption in Africa, it's misgovernance. Yeah. Just give you an example. If you're looking at, let's the outcome, what is coming out of the economies of Africa, 80% is going outside. 20% is remaining, just a number like that, okay? How could you tell me the mismanagement of the 20% is the cause of the poverty and not have in mind the 80% that is illegally taken out? how could you rationalize that? But because our intellectuals, many of them don't think, they don't think that they could understand, yeah, we're going to go to good governance. Yeah, but good governance of crumbs doesn't develop. And we are left with with crumbs, political, in terms of the kind of power that our leaders have, and economic crumbs. And they want to make us believe mismanaging these crumbs, that we are really poor. When in fact, it's like someone who is stealing your thing and there is someone who is stealing your cows, and luring you toward looking at a person. Be careful of the person who is wanting to steal your one chicken you have. You have only one chicken and you have 100 cows, but they want to make you believe that it's more important to watch the one who is about to steal your chicken than the one who is stealing your cow. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. And I don't know how some intellectuals do believe that it makes sense to them. These so-called too reckless and immature behaviors of the African leaders, as they say, are the fact when they diagnose why an African country is in economic trouble. There are others also at the service of financial capital who are engaged in painting foreign direct investment as the best way for an African industrialization to happen. Foreign direct investment is a capital coming from outside. If you invest in Mali, your money, the surplus value comes to you wherever you live, What is left behind is what to pay the laborers for, So foreign direct investment cannot develop a country. And already in the mid-1800s, Japanese realized that foreign direct investment, they don't want it. Unless there is a plan to phasing out its amount, just to start the business, to phasing out its amount, and organize workers to buy shares and all of that stuff, to end the foreign nature of that capital. Regardless of the effort they will make, it is an illusion to believe that such a mode of production, only fueled by greed, can last forever. I'm talking about the imperialist. The fate of the imperialist mode of production was well explained by Lenin in Imperialism, the last stage of capitalism. Kwame Nkrumah in Neocolonialism, the last stage of imperialism, clearly demonstrated that neocolonialism, the political, not economic reform of colonialism, is the last stage of the life of imperialism in Africa. The neocolonialist plan produced the independencies that were granted the non-viable African countries in the 1960s of the 1960s of the last century, was nothing but the improvement for the benefit of the colonizers of the chances of survival of the imperialist production. Imperial independence was not granted to us. It's the reorganization of our control, the facilitation, the legitimation of our control that was granted to us in the 1960s. Because independence is negative sovereignty, meaning you have the freedom to choose your policy, but you implement it. And if you don't have the wherewithal to implement it, you're coming back to me to give you loans, to give you assistance, to give you nonsense, And so independence were not for us, they were for them. This amelioration of this, as I said before, was indeed the replacement of getting rid of the occupation armies and changing administrators and the political. I don't know if, I'm sure that many of you are familiar with the book by Fanon, Black Skin, White Mask. If you want to know the mentality of the contrast with the power, really read the book, because Fanon explains their mentality. The neocolonial system targeted the African intellectual to serve as political interface between the imperialists and the people, by becoming president, by becoming parliamentarian, by becoming this, and by becoming that. The domestic comprador bourgeoisie, meaning the commerçant, if you want to call it the African merchants, the mercantile of the mercantile economy. The domestic comprador bourgeoisie ensured of the collection and exportation of the raw materials and the sale of the finished products in their countries. This is how national surplus value were and are being extracted legally from the neo-colonies, leading to the worsening of the poverty index in there. As I said above, all class-based mode of productions have limit. Class-based mode of production. Since the early 1990s, the imperialist mode of production has slowly but surely been getting closer to its limit in being able to provide jobs for the thousands of new hands which arrive in the job market of the neo-colonies. The inability of the job market of these countries to absorb these new job seekers, which we call the demographic dividend, the new job seekers, of which we will talk more about later, has today led to the rise of terrorism, risky migrations which are costing most African countries the lives of thousands and thousands of young people, and creating social unrest, easy recruitment grounds for warlords and terrorist groups in most of the African countries. The mismanagement, the inability of the countries to take care of this dividend, this God-given demographic dividend, new hand. I want to work. I want to make the country richer, but you cannot make me use my work, my hands. So that inability is one of the reasons. Luckily for us, who are trying to end imperialism and its political system, neocolonialism, the arrival of this mode of production at its limit has created a rise in the awareness among the young African intellectuals and the real cause of their desperate situation. The support of the coup d'etat in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and even Guinea was rooted in their declaration of their commitment to end French domination. In Senegal, the young Senegalese and the expatriate like myself, who made the election of President Joomaay possible, not me, that young man, possible, were answering to the call of his political party for systemic change. In other words, end French domination. So this is to say that the system is at its end. The rise in the awareness of the African youth, which makes up the majority of the African countries, is the obvious reason why the conditions to end neocolonialism, the political system which makes imperialist domination possible, are right. When Dr. Nkrumah in the early 1960s stated that Africans are crying for unity, his statement was not as obviously correct as it is today. The African youth is today crying for political union because it is the only viable way to take away the burden, making African countries vulnerable to the imperialist plan for political domination and economic exploitation. That burden is made up of the portion of their sovereignty, such as diplomacy, defense, indebtedness, currency, to only name a few, to only name the most. They have proven to be unable to manage. Citing the portion sovereignty, the countries cannot manage, and have proven, they have demonstrated they cannot manage them. Today, they have surrendered these portions of their people's sovereignty, or are in the process of doing so, to the former or new colonizers like Russia, China, the United States, Turkey, India, Japan, even South Korea today. This of major portion of their sovereignty is about to seal for a long time their control by foreign countries. Meaning, if this process, new scramble of Africa, right? We'll come back to that. Then we are in for a new era of servitude. Let me just, and that will be for a long time. Now, let's look at the de facto inability of African countries to take advantage of demographic dividend I spoke about. The arrival of a throng of new job seekers in the job market is an omen for a mode of production which can absorb most of these new hands. The sum of ready to get employed people is called demographic dividend. This demographic dividend can be produced by young people born in the country and have reached the age of employment, or migrants looking outside of their borders for better opportunities and living conditions. If the job market cannot absorb the majority of these new job seekers, then economic growth can absorb them. Economic growth will be the result. What will happen? If it is the opposite, meaning they cannot absorb them, then social unrest and instability is what happened. And that describes what is going on in Africa today. The arrival in the overwhelming majority of the African countries of the imperialist mode of production to its inability to make use of this demographic dividend has created restlessness. The young intellectual petty bourgeoisie group is the most affected by the paucity of the job market in the African countries. This is why reckless migration, causing thousands of deaths every year in the Sahara Desert and in the Mediterranean Ocean, have become popular with this group. This economic situation also creates a fertile ground for the recruiters of terrorist groups and the warlords, like I said before. The Sahel is today the epicenter of the insecurity caused by the easy recruitment by terrorist employers. As long as the inability to take advantage of this demographic dividend will persist, what we are observing now will remain in Africa. The only way out of this situation is political unification and the creation of a labor market which will be able to absorb most of the job seekers among the African youth, not only on the continent, but in the ghettos, in Harlem, in everywhere. If Africa was united today, any young black person who wants a job will have it. There's no doubt. Because Africa is hungry for consumption. Africa is empty of basic things that are actually necessary for today, like telephone, like a television, like a car, like others, you know. And the improvement of the capacity of African investors to create industry will create a huge job market which can absorb every single person who wants a job. The only way out is political unification and the creation of a labor market which could help both. Some people will say that the creation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area could be the answer. This is far from being the truth. The Africa Free Trade Area is nothing but an economic ploy as neocolonialism was for the elongation of the life of imperialist mode of production. Only political unification can create the level of access to credit with the kind of interest rate which will make the nascent industries on the continent capable of offering competitive prices to the product coming from China, the US, Europe. Only a federal government of the African people, by the African people, and for the African people could regulate the competition of these foreign goods with locally produced one in a manner that could preserve the interests of the indigenous industries built by domestically owned capital. Senegal cannot do that. They don't have the member. They don't have the power. Nigeria, South Africa, the porosity of their borders is legendary in terms of capital flight, in terms of entrance of product that they have no control of. In fact, they're even hungry to get these products because they get some money from it, which is peanuts, and then they turn the other eye somewhere else. So the next element that I would talk about is the ripeness of the conditions for ending the present mode of production. When I talk about mode of production, I'm talking about imperialism. After World War II and the lessons learned on the battlefield by the African soldiers, and the crushing defeat of the French by the Vietnamese General at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, and the beginning of armed struggle in Algeria, in Cameroon, the imperialists realized that the political system which was serving them was no longer adequate. This is what gave birth to the neo-colonial political system for the preservation of imperialist mode of production. This consisted of, as I said before, of getting rid of the most hideous aspect of colonialism. These were colonial administration and the occupying army. Neo-colonialism is therefore an enhancement of colonization for the colonizers, not for African people. As we said earlier, when Dr. Nkrumah stated in the early 1960s that the African people are crying for unity, and we know he meant political unity, that statement was not as correct as it is today. The African people, particularly the youth, is crying for unity. That's what I call awareness, ripeness of the reality for a need for a change. We weren't there in 1963. We are there today. The arrival of the imperialist mode of production and the unsustainability of the political system, neocolonialism at their limits, has created a rise in the awareness of the young African intellectuals as to what is the real cause of their desperate situation. They have found themselves today. The support by the youth of the coup d'etat in Mali, as I said before, Niger and even Guinea, was rooted in their declaration of a commitment to end French domination. In Senegal, it was the same. This awareness of the people as to what is the source of their problem regarding security, reasonable access to opportunities, and self-betterment is rooted in the reality of the condition in which they live. It is therefore a fact-based one and cannot be made disappear by the conniving theories of the imperialists and their parrots, the majority of the African intellectual. Make it disappear because it's there. In the 1960s you could, but now no longer possible. It is today visible through what has happened in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, and Senegal, that the African youths have completely lost hope in the capacity of neocolonialism and its imperialist mode of production to create an environment where life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is possible. At every opportunity which is given to them, they demonstrate a new system which can create realistic hope for the fulfillment of the majority of the people's dream of bettering their lives, and they are ready to work for it. The conditions are ripe. Supporting the coup d'etat in Mali, and I'm repeating this, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, and waving the Russian flag is not an advocacy for new imperialist domination. It is an expression of a Yanamar. We have enough of French imperialism, which is imperialism in general. The best known quote from Frantz Fanon is without a doubt that each generation must, in the relative opacity of things, discover its mission, accomplish it, or betray it. The present generation of African, I'm talking about us, the present generation of African people's mission is to seize the opportunity of the ripeness of the condition of the end of imperialism and neocolonialism. Seize that opportunity and deal the last blow to imperial mode of production, imposed on our people, and ending also neocolonialism, the political system which sustained it. We have no right to miss this opportunity offered to us today to finish the job by the independentist and the civil rights leaders generation. We have we cannot have an excuse. Last, I'm going to deal with the new scramble for Africa. What do we explain? When in the 1989, the Berlin Wall fell, and then a year later or so, the USSR was dissolved, the United States of America and its Western allies were ecstatic for their hard, quote unquote, won victory in the Cold War, which was not, this was not a Cold War. In the countries where civil wars, wanton assassination of genuine nationalist political leaders was its form of expression. This war was declared between the former allies against Nazism in World War II. It caused millions of deaths around the world. The Vietnam War was only the tip of the iceberg of the devastations caused by the war, or wrongfully called Cold War. The end of this war was the beginning for Americans, they declared, the beginning of the global Pax Americana era, which was, and this was declared by Dick Cheney, Donald Rumsfeld, Paul Wolfowitz, and our sister, Condoleezza Rice. Yes, here's my sister. A document, in fact, which was entitled Rebuilding American Defense Strategies, Force, and Resources for the New Century, was written in September of 2000 by the new conservative think tank, the Project of a New American Century. Not to be left behind in this expression of joy, some academics jumped into the bandwagon and published books and articles to tell the rest of the world to accept the de facto that the American model of politics, which is American democracy, and the economic development, which is neoliberalism, are the most perfect that humankind will ever arrive at. Actually, I think that you will Francis Fukuyama expressed it the best way through the title of his book, the bestseller, The End of History and the Last Man Standing. Well, what he and the members of his band did not know, or at best were pretending not to know, was that they are repeating the same mistake made by Friedrich Hegel, a philosopher, a German philosopher, in the mid-19th century, when he stated that the Prussian state was the image and reality of reason, meaning the perfect one. There is nothing we could do better than the Prussian state. And he was proven wrong very quickly. It didn't take long before China dampened their enthusiasm by proving them wrong through the inroad it was making, particularly in Africa, in its imperial condition. Thanks to a humongous amount of cash reserve accumulated through the compulsory saving imposed on the Chinese salary earners, China was offering credits with interest rates more than the finance capitals of the West. It engaged in building railroads and other infrastructures with these so-called cheap loans, and mainly Chinese workforce.
That's right.
Enriching its people while further impoverishing the people of the African countries who took these loans. This Chinese breakthrough in the global Pax Americana geopolitical map of the world opened the gate for Russia, and Vladimir Putin did not waste his time jumping into the bandwagon. of his of this new scramble for Africa, for grabbing his piece of Africa. Japan, India, South Korea, Turkey also joined this new race for a piece of the African cake. Each one of these profit hunters recruited its own set of intellectuals again, particularly academics, to be the advocate of the plan to get their piece of the African pie. The role of these academics was to feed the African people, particularly with an attractive painting of the type of relationship their imperialist employer wants to develop, particularly on the economic field level, with their country. I see today former Maoist others, they oh no, China is not imperialist. I asked them one question. Well, is this like what do you call it? Is it a gift?
A gift.
Well, like, yeah, is it a gift that they're making to Africa? Ask the Ghanaian, who took those loans to build a railroad, and at the same time they were imposed for 100 years that the Japanese exploit. The Chinese get control of a certain area in Ghana, and you're telling me that these are cheap loans? No, they're not cheap loans. The new scramble for the African lands in Africa and the Caribbean island is today in full motion. I strongly believe that this was what prompted Molefi Julius Nyerere to declare in Accra in 1997 that without continental unity, there is no future for Africa. One of the wisest African political giants stated in the same speech that he was wrong in May 1963 and Dr. Nkrumah was right, which means